A Kind Voice Radio.
Hello and welcome to Your Kind Voice. This is the program where we talk about how people use their kind voices to make a difference. I'm your host, David Levins, and today we're going to be exploring how people connect with kind voices from the past. And joining us in this exploration is Bill Phillippe, blues artist. And we had Bill on before, and on that program he quite eloquently explained how he connected with another artist, Robert Johnson. So I want to start off the show by playing that clip.
Right now, we're talking with Bill Phillippe. Let's hear some music from this wonderful featured guest. This is Come On In My Kitchen.
You better come on in my kitchen. It's gonna be raining outdoors. Woman I love, stolen my best friend. Some joker got lucky, stole her back again. You better come on in my kitchen. It's gonna be raining outdoors. I know she's gone, she won't come back. I took that last nickel out her nation's sack. You better come on in my kitchen. It's gonna be raining outdoors. Don't you hear the wind howl? But don't you hear the wind howl? You better come on in my kitchen. It's gonna be raining outdoors. Woman gets in trouble, everybody throws her down. Looking for a good friend, no one can be found. You better come on in my kitchen. It's gonna be raining outdoors. Well, that time coming, it's gonna be slow. You can't make that winter bed, oh, it's right on so. You better come on in my kitchen. It's gonna be raining outdoors. Don't you hear the wind howl? But don't you hear the wind howl? You better come on in my kitchen. It's gonna be raining outdoors.
One of the purest forms of original American music. I love the blues. I love that gritty, sort of scary, raw dirtiness. It's amazing. Tell us a little bit about that song there.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's a Robert Johnson tune that I arranged slightly differently than the original Robert version. When I started playing Delta blues, one of the promises that I made to myself that I broke was I was not going to play Robert Johnson, because similar to what I was talking about earlier about Blind Willie Johnson and how, these guys are like, that's It's perfect. Don't mess with it. Don't try to replicate it. Just enjoy it. Go make your own way. And but what I found was as I started building a repertoire and listening to different folks and figuring out what songs really like spoke to me that I wanted to play, there were so many great Robert Johnson songs that I was like, man, you got to figure out a way to play these tunes. Mm-hmm. And so that song in particular was the first Robert Johnson song that I learned to play. And it took a really long time because if you're familiar with Robert's original version, he plays slide on that, and I don't play slide, and I invested some time in trying to figure out if I wanted to do that, but I figured out that I wasn't fluid enough at it and comfortable enough at it that I could speak with it like I wanted to, but I could do that with my just playing fretted, and so I took this approach that this Chicago blues guy taught me, a guy named Steve Freund. I could tell you stories about Steve Freund all day long. It'd be two whole shows on Steve Freund, how badass Steve is. But he taught me this particular style of rhythm playing that's called G position, where you're basically doing a G chord down at the open frets or down at the nut, and by using kind of a piano player approach or a Mississippi John Hurt kind of thing, you pick out melody notes while you're thumping on this big fat G note at the bottom. And that when I took that approach to this Robert Johnson song, I found kind of like my way in to the Robert Johnson material. I found this like different way to go at it that wasn't, Eric Clapton playing Robert Johnson or John Hammond playing Robert Johnson or Robert Johnson playing Robert Johnson, but Bill Phillippe playing Robert Johnson. Cool. And so that's one of my favorite songs to play because, like you said, I mean it's gritty, it's raw, there's so much sadness and sorrow in those lyrics. I mean, that's, if you ask me what's an example of a blues song, that's a blues song.
And that was Bill Phillippe on with Tyler Wolf. Now through the magic of radio, Bill Phillippe is joining us live. Bill, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks for having me, David. Pleasure to be back.
Excellent. I'm thrilled to have you back because that clip just said so much, and I really want to get into it. But I think a good starting point is, obviously, you're a big student of music. Can you talk about the importance of being a student of music to being a musician?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think, with any endeavor that you take in your life, I think you realize quickly when you get into something that if you love something, you really never stop learning. You're always studying, you're always learning something new, you're always evolving, and music has definitely been that way for me. I've been playing music since I was about 17, which would give me about 35 years of doing it. And I've watched, if I look back at what I used to play when I first picked up the guitar and when I play today when I pick up a guitar, there's a common thread that kind of runs through all of it, and I can hear, my own voice in all of those things. But boy, it sure has changed a lot. So, it's a wonderful journey if you look at it that way.
It is. It's a very beautiful thing, and it's endless things to learn on it. Now, in your clip, you spoke about speaking to the song and almost having a conversation and connecting with the music. Can you expand on that a little bit? How does one connect? Because, for example, I love the Beatles songs, but I wouldn't be able to take them in my own direction.
Well, for me, what it is there's something that you hear in a song that resonates with you as a listener, right? And it could be different things for different folks, and certainly different types of music for different folks. And like you just mentioned, the Beatles. I love the Beatles. I love a lot of the early Beatles, in fact. And what I think it is for me, there's something that triggers an emotional response or connection where, whatever the emotion that the song is conveying is something that resonates with me on a personal level and not necessarily something that I'm consciously aware of. And so like for material, like when I go out and I look at different songs to learn and work into my repertoire for playing shows and stuff, that's what I'll do. I'll be listening to whoever, Tom Waits or somebody, and there'll be something about a particular song that just grabs me and kicks me in the butt enough to go, you need to sit down and learn this song and then figure out a way to do something with it. And a really good example of that is I for whatever reason I came to Tom Waits kind of late in life. Like I was always aware of Tom Waits, but he was someone that I never really listened to much. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, I went out and for whatever reason I saw Tom Waits CD. I was like, I really should give Tom Waits a try. And I got this 3 CD set of his called Orphan. And there's a lifetime of incredible songs on this 3-disc set. And one of the tunes that really stuck out for me was this song called "You Can Never Hold Back Spring." And it's 2 minutes and like 35 seconds of just pure beauty. And it's one of these songs where Tom Waits does like a really slow ballad with him at the piano and very minimal instrumentation, and he's singing in somewhat a normal voice for him. He's not doing a really affected voice, and it's just raw and beautiful. And that's kind of the song that got me into Tom Waits, got me into like 7 or 8 albums of his and listening to him quite frequently. And it's a song that I finally, about a month or two ago, I was sitting down and kind of doing like a practice session, and I was going through my notes of, I always keep like a backlog of songs that I want to learn. Like when I hear a song I want to learn, I write it down in my little workbook for my music stuff. And I was going through that list, and I was like, I looked through it, and I'm like, what song jumps out as the one you really want to work on, you really want to invest time in? And that song finally kind of registered with me. I was like, you know what? Kind of like the Robert Johnson song. It was like, I love this song, and it's so beautiful. I don't know if I could approach it and do anything with it that would make it any better or any different for me than listening to Tom Waits doing it. But I was like, you know what? I need to do that. And I started thinking about how to arrange the tune, and I went out and got the sheet music for it and sat down and started transcribing things. And, I haven't worked it up yet. It's still in the process because that's kind of how it goes with some of those things. But that's, for me, that's kind of how, like, when I connect with something, it's got to be something that I think it's an emotional thing that just is inside of you. It just grabs inside of you and says, come here and do something.
Wow, that's really powerful. Now I want to connect it with something else. We had an artist, Natalie Meebach. She did basket sculpture based on storms like hurricanes, and she would do this beautiful basket sculpture that a certain strand or color meant a certain wind pattern or direction. And then they translated those basket sculptures into music. So you translated a hurricane from physical art to music to kind of give you a visual model of something. Now,
interesting.
How does that connect with you translating a piece of music? Do you try to visualize things in the way she does? And if you had those talents, could you make art to represent a song?
Well, I don't really have a lot of talent with the visual arts personally. Many years ago, I tried my hand at painting because I have a couple of good friends that are incredible painters. But I don't know that I would be able to. I think, for me, I think, music and sound is just so at the core of my being. And that's how I choose to kind of express myself, is through those things. Like when I'm writing songs, usually what starts for me with a song is an idea about wanting to express an emotion or express and explore maybe a character and his perspective on a particular situation. And that's usually that's how I take, these abstract things and put them into something that you can sit down and experience.
Interesting. Can you expand upon that as a character?
Oh, yeah, sure. I read quite a bit, and And it's often that, I get inspiration for songs from different characters in the books that I've read. And, one that jumps to mind is there's a song that I had on my first CD, Ghosts, and the name of the song was Wedded Heart. And I got that idea for a song from reading, oddly enough, a spy novel. It's Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy was the book, John LeClaire novel. And in that book, one of the main characters is this gentleman who's a British spy, and he's got his wife at home who's kind of like a stay-home wife. It's England in the 60s, and she's notorious for having extramarital affairs. And all of his friends know it, and he knows it. But when he's with her, he pretends like it doesn't happen, like it's never happened. He pretends like he doesn't know. And I remember reading the book and just thinking, man, I could not do that. I could not see myself just pretending like stuff like that didn't happen or wasn't happening. And so it struck me, and I thought, wow, what is going on in that guy's head? What is going on in that character's head that makes him want to do that and just live that life of, denial? And so I sat down and I wrote that song, Wedded Heart, from his perspective, him trying to explain himself and what he's going through. And for me, it was a really interesting experience because, a lot of songwriting, many people, most people write songs based on their own personal emotional experience or just life experiences. And so it's really interesting as a songwriter to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and see how they fit. And then, like, for me, what ends up happening is I end up connecting my emotions with a character, and then there becomes kind of like a hybrid of the character's voice and my own personal emotional life experience coming through in the protagonist of the song.
Wow, that really connects with the roots of a kind voice, and because the roots of a kind voice came from a book. So I'd like to take our first break, talk about that, and then kind of connect the two.
The alchemy of kindness is one that we believe. When we reach out to each other, we both receive.
Hi, I'm Bruce Grammel, and I'm one of the original hosts on A Kind Voice Radio. My song, The Alchemy of Kindness, is about the good things that happen when kind voices come together. What you're about to hear is an invitation from author Mara Wilson, whose 46-year-old buddy, Al Scarborough, from a game-playing group, needs a new heart. So I'm asking you to please open your heart to Al's story and imagine if we can all work together to make our world a kinder, more connected place.
Imagine your own heart betraying you with every beat. Imagine you're 46 and waiting for a heart transplant. Imagine you're told you need $120,000 to be saved. Imagine your time running out with every beat of your heart. Al Scarborough doesn't have to imagine it. He's living it. Now imagine that you helped Al by sharing his story with your family or friends. Imagine his story going viral. Imagine Al with a new heart. Please help save Al's life. You can find more information about Al Scarborough on Facebook at We Heart Al or at Al Scarborough Support Team on GoFundMe.com. Thank you.
When kind voices come together, it seems we're never alone. Kind Voice Radio.
And welcome back to Your Kind Voice. My name is David Levins, and we're here talking with Bill Phillippe. Bill, welcome back to the program.
Thanks. Glad to be back.
Now, what really grabs me in how you were explaining that Robert Johnson song is your reverence for Robert Johnson, that he got it so well, but then you were able to find a way to collaborate and kind of do a joint venture. So the visual I imagine is like a road called Flat G Way that goes into the space of Robert Johnson's materials, and the connection of the space between the two of you, and a kind of collaboration that you wanted to make his song express it in your own way. Is that an accurate visual?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, that's probably a good way to describe what transpires when most folks are doing cover versions or interpretation of other, people's material, because this is something I've talked about this with my musician friends many times, is, we all you can listen to one song, 5 different people listen to it, and 5 different people will take away something different from the song, because, it's similar, I think, probably to how people are when they interpret art or paintings. You look at a painting and, 5 different folks will have 5 different takes on what it's about or what resonates with them. And, when an artist like puts out a record or puts out a song, you don't know that resonance is going to be for individual people. You know why you wrote the song. You know what you wanted out of the song. You know what the song expresses for you. But when you put it out there and you give it to other people, they do their own thing with it. And so it's a really interesting way to communicate, if you will. In a way, it's indirect, because you're not communicating a specific idea, but in a way, it's so powerful because you're going beyond language. You're going into something that's below language and connecting with people in that way.
I mean, it's a very powerful thing. When I came up with The Kind Voice, it's based on a story of John Steinbeck, but then other people wrote music about it, including yourself, and they've expressed it much more eloquently using music. And I'm like, yes, that's it. But the story is Travels with Charlie, and he traveled across America when he was really at the end of his life, because he wanted to know what America was like now. But the now was in 1960. And one of the places he visited was New Orleans, when Ruby Bridges was the first African-American attending an all-white school. And he saw these ugly demonstrations. And he said, he's been to bullfights. He's seen crowd mentality. And he gets it. But then he wondered, where are the others? Where are all the kind voices he knew in New Orleans? And he concluded he didn't know where they were. But what went out on television was beamed all over to the world, unchallenged by the other things that he knows are there.
Mm-hmm.
So to me,
really?
he's saying that there's a space with kind voices there. And what goes out when I see television or read the newspaper, sometimes I don't see those kind voices and kind stories. And I wanted to create a group of radio shows that told those stories of the kind voices and the good work they're doing. But this has to be something that's approached with reverence. And I just wanted to get your thought on the connection and how it connects with music.
Well, I think you're right. I think there seems to be a in mass media cultural in general, right? There's for whatever reason, if you pick up a newspaper and you nowadays, if you go online and you look at a newspaper, the stories that seem to get attention are not stories about kind voices. You're right, and there seems to be. I would almost say it's as soon as you take it away from the experience itself, then you don't have the totality of it. Like I experience, like when I go out and I play a show and I meet people at the show, people come up and talk to me, and there's always kindness. There's always kindness there. Even if somebody doesn't like what I do, nobody's coming up and throwing tomatoes at me. And I think when you're not, it's when you have interpersonal relationships, when you have one-on-one contact, or when it's people connecting with each other, that's when the true nature of kindness is present. I mean, when you like last night, I live out here in San Francisco, and last night my partner and I, we went to this modern dance performance, and she's worked with this dance company off and on doing different design consulting for them. And, we went there and we saw people that we haven't seen for a year or so, because that was the last time they had one of these performances. And, there was just this wonderful positive atmosphere in the air, because we had, there's like a couple hundred people at this place gathered all to support and experience this artistic expression, and we all connect with that, and so we're all sharing the joy of that with each other, and it's a beautiful thing. And that's one of the things that I love about music, about art, anything really that's a creative endeavor. When people gather, experience it, it's very positive. You have tremendous positive energy there. Very different than like a football game, where oftentimes people aren't so positive.
And I think the difference is football and most sports have a winner and a loser. But when you're performing music, it's almost a collaboration with your audience. You're offering something and they're receiving it, and it's a shared positive energy when it's done well.
Absolutely. I think you're right. I think that's very true.
Now, can we talk a little bit about the joy of discovering a song that speaks to you and the joy of creating it and finding your kind voice in that, and how that differs from the joy of performing the song and sharing it?
Sure, absolutely. Let's see. Let me take. Well, it's interesting. There's a couple of things I've noticed as my progression as a musician has kind of evolved over the years. Like when you were playing that clip earlier of me and Tyler talking about the Robert Johnson tune "Come On in My Kitchen," and it's funny. There are some songs that, like "Come On in My Kitchen" in particular, that when I approach them, it's almost like meeting someone new. It really is. I mean, like for me, the mental experience of a song is you're meeting someone. You're meeting someone, and you're trying to figure out how you work together, and whether or not you can make it better, or whether or not you should just leave it alone. And like "Come On in My Kitchen" was a song where I loved it. I was drawn to it, and I had to play it, but I couldn't play it like Robert Johnson played it and do any service to it. And so that one, I came up with a whole different approach to it based on different things that I knew that worked for me as a musician, and then ultimately I found a way to make them work for the song. And I do that. I do that typically when I meet a song and it's just so right the way it is, and there's no point in trying to do like a note for note thing, because for me there are a lot of musicians who do note for note stuff and are quite adept at it, and I tons of praise and respect for those guys. But I've never had the technical facility to do a lot of stuff note for note. And so I find myself in the position of, okay, well, how do I make it uniquely my own? And that's a skill set too, but it's a different one. And neither one is better or worse. It's just you got to work with what you got. But like there's Skip James is another blues man that is he's kind of like, well, actually Robert Johnson. If you go back and you listen to Robert Johnson songs and you listen to Skip James songs, you can hear Robert Johnson actually borrowing from Skip James, because Skip James stuff was recorded about 10 or 15 years before Robert Johnson stuff. And so he's kind of like one of the original, very haunting, very dark Delta blues guitar players, and he was a piano player too. But I went after a couple of his tunes, and one of them in particular, it's called Hard Time Blues, Hard Time Killing Floor Blues. And they're, kind of the similar thing that I do with Robert Johnson, in that I listened to that tune and I was just like, man, that is such a heavy, deep blues tune. I'm like, I got to learn that song. I got to figure out how to play that song. And this is one where I went, nowadays, I mean, the technology and the access to things that we have now as human beings, and particularly as artists, is phenomenal. I mean, within, 15 minutes of sitting at my computer, I had listened to and found like 7 or 8 different versions of this song by different people across the years, who, folks had taken videos of them and thrown them up on YouTube. And so I had a potpourri of different ways to approach this song that different folks had done. And as I listened to each of them, and as I listened to the Skip James one, I went, okay, what's the essential, what's the nugget of that song and for me, what is it? What's the meaning in that song for me, and how do I take that and put it out there? And then what I end up doing is I found, similar to the Come On In My Kitchen, I found an approach through a particular position and chording of that song, and that became the foundation for my interpretation. And so I ended up actually writing a couple of instrumental sections within the tune that I thought took that theme and expanded on it and made it even more powerful and impactful. And so now, you know, when I do Hard Time Killing Floor Blues, you wouldn't, if you were used to the Skip James version, you would go, hey, that's not Hard Time Killing Floor Blues. And I would say, well, it's not the Skip James version of Hard Time Killing Floor Blues, but it's still the same song. It's the melody, it's the lyrics, but I've put them in a whole different kind of container for you to experience them in.
Interesting. I love the vocabulary you're using. And you mentioned extract the nuggets or the nucleus of a song. Now, as a student of music, you must have hundreds of songs that you've understood the nuggets of. I kind of envision a chef in a kitchen with a lot of ingredients. Do you sometimes blend these nuggets together to create something totally new?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think that's part of what drives me as a composer, because you know what I find happens for me is, you know, I'll go to approach a song like the Skip James one we were just talking about, and in figuring out an approach for it, I'll come up with new things that are, you know, new positions on the neck, or new ways to, you know, play a bass line along with a melody line, and those things become, you know, kind of, you know, what I would say like your tricks of the trade, right? The things that you throw in your pocket, and, you know, I'm going to use that again somewhere else because that's just too good to only use one time. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny you talk about the chef and, you know, hundreds of different ingredients and stuff, and, you know, I have found that the thing that kind of retains my entire musical life outside of my brain is this little 3-ring notebook I've got. And I started putting it together when I started learning the Delta blues tunes about 5 years ago, because this was a whole new adventure for me, because I had played in bands for 25 years and had always been like, you know, I'd been an electric guitar player. I played acid jazz. I played Chicago blues. I played, you know, Al Green type R&B bands. And I had done that forever, and I had never really played acoustic music. And once I got the bug and had to do that, I went back to the Delta blues and the stuff that I had always listened to over the years, but had never really tried to play. Because, you know, just it wouldn't have worked in a band context like I was playing in. And so when I started, you know, what I would say it was definitely an adventure for me. I sat down with this little notebook and I started making lists of songs that I wanted to learn, and then I would kind of like, you know, I would listen to the songs, I'd write down the lyrics, I'd pick out the notes and write down the melodies, and then I'd sit down and I'd start working on the arrangements and how would I actually perform these songs. And you know, as my gal would attest, you know, I'll say to her, hey, I'm going to do some practicing tonight, and she's like, okay, is it going to be the crazy practicing or is it going to be playing the songs? And what she means by the crazy practicing is, you know, I'll sit and I'll play a phrase or work on playing a phrase, you know, 100 times in 15 or 20 minutes, trying to get it right, you know, trying to get my head and my hands and my voice around a particular element of a song. And you know, once you get into that and you start doing that, you find things. You find ways, like I said, you find ways of making particular sounds or voicings, and they resonate with you, and you do throw them in your spice cupboard. And I've got bunches of those, and those things find their ways into songs, because I often find when I sit down to start writing a new song, I usually have the lyrics or I have a theme in mind, and I'll sit down and I'll have that kind of story or lyric or theme running in my brain while I start picking on the guitar. And invariably I go and I pick the things that are in the Spice cupboard, right? I go and I grab, oh man, I wonder if this riff would fit with this. How would this work? And you know, it doesn't always work, just like, you know, anything you do where you're experimenting, you know, it's trial and error. But boy, I tell you, when it works, you know it works. You really know it works, and that is a joy that is immeasurable.
Very cool. And it differs from writing. In writing, you're trying to put together thoughts, but in music, it's a more nuanced, more fluid puzzle pieces that you connect in, and that's a beautiful thing. Now, you mentioned a notebook. What makes a notebook more useful to you than, say, index cards or an online method of organizing all your spices?
Well, you know, for me, the notebook thing, I think it just goes back to the era that I'm from. Like, I grew up in the 70s and got out of college in the mid-80s. And so, you know, I remember going to school and I had, like, you know, 4 different notebooks for the 4 different classes that I had, right? So that, I think that was ingrained in me. That was how you organize your thoughts and your work. And so it was very natural for me to sit down with a piece of paper and, you know, make out a list of here's the stuff I'm going to work on, and I threw them in my notebook. And then, of course, to personalize my notebook and give it some juju, I've got, you know, a picture of Mississippi John Hurt in there, and I've got a picture of Booker White, you know, on the cover. So it's very clear that that's Bill's music notebook. And that, you know, there's supposed to be some deep blues happening within the confines of that notebook. And so that's what made sense to me. And, you know, it's kind of funny. I've got like a cover sheet that goes in there that's kind of like my summary of, hey, what am I working on, so that if I don't work on something for a few days, I'll open it up. And I've categorized the songs that I'm working on between 3 categories. I've got one category that's polishing. So those are the songs that I know them, I've learned them, but I'm just getting them to the point where I've got them memorized and I can walk into a gig and play them. And then I've got stuff that I call in the shed, which means I'm working on it. I'm trying to figure it out. I ain't got it yet, but I'm working at it. And then I got stuff that I call in the yard, which means at some point I'm going to take it from the yard and put it in the shed.
Interesting. Very colorful way of dividing things up. We need to take our final break, and we'll be right back after this.
Okay.
This is NASCAR driver Kurt Busch, and I am proud to support our nation's veterans. Do you know you can get a faster decision on your disability compensation claims by filing an electronic fully developed claim, or e-claim, on eBenefits? Take it from a guy who lives his life in the fast lane. Faster is better. Visit ebenefits.va.gov today to learn more.
My name is Claire Bloom, and I started a 100% volunteer nonprofit organization in October 2011 to put food in the hands of local children who have little to nothing to eat for the 68 hours between the free lunch they get in school on Friday and the free breakfast they get in school on Monday. I call the organization End 68 Hours of Hunger, and our vision is to end childhood hunger in America one school at a time. We start programs wherever we have 2 volunteers in a community who are prepared to step up and take responsibility for running the program, and we grow from there. Today, we're feeding 900 children each weekend in 29 communities, and we're growing. If you're interested in starting a program in your community, please visit our website at www.end68hoursofhunger.org and click on the tab at the top of the page that says FAQ. Everything you need to know about starting a program is there, including videos on how to talk with groups, how to set up your space, and even what kind of food to include in the bags. Email me at end68hoursofhunger@gmail.com, and thanks.
A lot has changed from when Nola Osh started school until the time she finished.
When I received my diploma, it was a big to-do.
At 95 years young, Nola became the world's oldest college graduate.
If we don't concentrate on our ages, we go ahead and do things as if we were younger.
So no matter how old you are, live life and pass it on. From the Foundation for a Better Life at Values.com.
A Kind Voice Radio.
And Welcome back to Your Kind Voice. I'm David Levins. We're here with Bill Phillippe. Now, Bill, where we left off is you were talking about the joy of creating and how you create music, which was fascinating. Now, can you talk about the joy of performing and connecting and playing it for an audience?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That's one of the things that I think when I first started playing music live, like, I go back to when I was first playing back when I was in college, and the kind of if you're not really good, or if you're learning and you don't have your chops together, you end up the place you end up playing or experiencing music with other people is usually a jam session. You usually have musicians, for whatever reason, we find each other. We just I remember in college I was in an English class, and there was this one guy, and he and I kept looking at each other like, do we know each other? Or where do we know each other from? And he started talking to me, and he was from Chicago, and I was from Bloomington, which is a small town outside of Chicago, and we got to talking about stuff, and turned out, sure enough, he was a bass player, and I was a guitar player. And so, throughout my college experience, that one meeting with that guy ended up getting me into a guitar teacher, to jam sessions and things like that. And what you find is, early on, when you're playing with other people, when you're playing music with other people, it's very akin to a conversation without words. You're expressing ideas, and they're expressing ideas, and you're doing it together. And there is there's an energy that you create doing that you don't have sitting by yourself and playing in your room. And that's it's frankly, it's addictive because it's so much fun. It's just incredibly fun to do. And what happens when you get out with an audience is you take that and it's not even doubled. It's like, to the power of 10 from that, because you get on stage and you're playing music with, usually, most of the times you're playing music with people that you like. And so you have a camaraderie, and you're creating and expressing this vision together. And then when you have an audience that's responding and reacting and enjoying the music, they feed energy back at you. I'm telling you, it is the greatest thing in the world. It is so much fun. And there's a flip side to that coin too. There's going to be shows that you go out and you play, and you can feel where the energy transference is just the opposite, where it's a crowd that's not really interested in what you're doing, and they're sucking the life out of you. And those are the gigs that you pray are few and far between and short. But I would have to say, in 30 years of doing this, more often than not, it's the kind where you get on stage and you're playing, and folks are just reacting to it and just loving it. I mean, I did a show. I do a weekly show by myself where I go out and I play at this local brewery. They've got a little, tasting room, and I go out and play my Delta blues and my original tunes for like 3 hours a night, and the people there all love it. They all love it, and they come up and they're excited, and it's a nice, fun gig, and it's a wonderful thing for me because I get to workshop my material that I'm working on, on a regular, consistent basis. But last weekend, in fact, a week ago today, they had a special event, and they wanted to hire my trio. And so I went in there with my clarinet player and my acoustic bass player, and it was a totally different experience because it was the three of us playing, and the energy that we have playing together and the joy of that was just totally different. It's the same material, same songs, same room, but a totally different experience. And in fact, the guy who runs the place approached me this week when I was doing my solo gig, and he said, "Man," he goes, "that was a great show Saturday." He's like, the sound of the three of you guys together was so big. It was just, awesome. I said, "Yeah." I said, "Man, we were having a good time." He goes, "I can tell. You guys are having a great time." So, there's definitely a different experience when you take it out and you put it in front of people because there's some communication going on. I mean, if you wanted to go really deep on like philosophical stuff, we
Absolutely.
could go there. I mean, Well, okay, so this may sound crazy. The first time somebody told me about this stuff, it sounded crazy to me. But there's are you familiar with like the Sufi religion?
Not too much, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, so Sufism is like it's a strain of Islam, and it goes back to like the 1300s. And there's I got hip to this book actually from Ry Cooder, the fantastic slide guitar player. I remember him talking about this book in an interview. It was called The Mysticism of Sound and Music. And I 5-6 years ago, I went out and picked up this book and I read it, and it's a really hard read. It's a difficult read because it's a religious philosophical book, but the general tenet of it, which is very interesting, I think, and intriguing, is that at the molecular level, all of us as human beings are in motion. We're in spinning. We're vibrating, and what they talk about in this book was the idea that sound and music impact people, because you're creating vibrations and sound waves with music that have a way of impacting people, and you can impact them in various different ways depending upon what music you play or how you play it. And so the idea that when you play music and you put this vibration out there, it transacts on people. And I think, obviously for me, it's as a musician, I kind of relate to that because I know how powerful music is in my life. But I think it makes sense that there is an exchange of energy when you put that out there and people listen to it and then they react to it.
No, it's a very powerful thing. Now, I want to go back to, you were talking about earning your musical chops. What advice would you give a musician who had a little bit of success but at times feels he's not so good and maybe thinking about quitting and not working through? Because there must have been a point when you had peaks and valleys and you were in a valley. What advice would you give to someone who's in a valley at the moment, how to climb back up and get their musical chops or master their craft?
Wow, that's a good question. There's a few things. I mean, for me, what I find is if I've got something to work on, if I've got like a song that I'm working on, I'm trying to learn, or if I've got a song that I'm trying to write, I get a lot of joy out of the process of playing, out of sitting down, putting your hands on the instrument and making a sound from it. And I've learned over the years that has to be kind of the foundation or the base for why you play music. You can't play music because you go out to the club and people tell you how great you are. Well, I guess you could play music for that reason. I don't think you'll be successful or that you'll do it for very long, because invariably that's not going to be the experience that you have. It's not like that 100% of the time. I think the making music has to resonate with you, and if you're stuck, if you're in a plateau, I highly recommend searching out a good teacher. I've had throughout my career, I've taken lessons with different guitar teachers that have pushed me into different directions, and kind of like in fact in the interview with Tyler when we were talking about that guy named Steve Freund, who he taught me this G position thing that I took and turned into something completely different than what he was showing me to do it for. But I took it as one of my spices and threw it in my spice jar, and then I figured out how to use it in a bunch of different ways. And it's things like that where if you like I had talked about a little bit before too, about how you're always evolving, you're always learning, you're always growing. And so when you're not inspired by what you're doing, then I think it's time to go back to what makes it fresh for you, or what would be new and interesting for you to explore that will kind of kickstart the joy and the relationship that you have with your music.
Wow, no, that's a terrific answer. Now, you also mentioned shows, and most of the shows you create good energy and the crowd plays upon it. Have you ever been in a show when the energy wasn't so good and you were able to kind of turn it around a little bit?
I can't off the top of my head recollect one where it was a bad one and we turned it around. I can't. I don't think what we ever did was we were never really able to turn it around and get the audience into it I remember walking away from those gigs and just feeling depleted, where you gave everything you had and they were just taking as opposed to sharing. And that's part of life, right? I mean, I think we've all had relationships with people where, sometimes you feel like, wow, that wasn't really equal, or that wasn't really fair. And so you just, you watch out for those, and when you get into them, you protect yourself.
You just kind of reset a little.
Yeah, exactly. And you look for, you keep doing it, because why would you ever stop? Why would you give up? That doesn't make no sense.
No, it's a beautiful thing. Now, earlier you talked about characters, and I want to try to connect something and see if you see anything in the connection. A random event happened to Catherine Ryan Hyde, where she wasn't able to thank people who helped her, and they really did a nice thing for her. So she invented these characters and wrote this book, Pay It Forward. And that's become part of our collective vocabulary on how we could help each other, how we could be kind voices to each other. Now, when you create music and create characters, do you try to create a story as well to get someone to express something? Do you have a goal, what you want your audience to feel?
No, I don't typically have a goal for what I want the audience to feel. For me, the goal is really about trying to express that character's viewpoint, or trying to express the emotion that's inherent in the song. Like some of the stuff that I've done, like recently in the last kind of like year or so, I found that I've been taking to writing songs, and in the songs, I'll create characters that are based on conceptions of emotions or feelings. And what I mean by that is I wrote this one song called Everything I Have Is Gray. And it was based on my gal one night. She was picking out clothes to go out to dinner, and she comes out and she goes, everything I have is gray. And I said, wow, that is a song title. That right there is a song title. And so I ended up taking that and creating the character, the protagonist, the voice of the song was about someone who, was depressed. Everything in their life felt gray, like there was no joy. And in the song, I wrote a line that says, hope sits defeated and she hums a wistful tune. So taking the idea, the conception of hope, and turning it into a person, and giving that person an interaction with the character of the song. And for me, when I first did that, I was like, wow, that's really interesting. I really like the way that deals with hope, how you take something that's a concept and you make it tangible. And what I've ended up doing is I use that technique in a number of songs, because I find it's really interesting to take these intangible conceptions and put them into a song lyric and tell a story as if you understood what that person or that idea's perspective is.
That's a fascinating concept.
Yeah, and it's, I tell you, I mean, it's for me as a writer, it's incredibly interesting and challenging, because you get to express things, and obviously what I find is I end up expressing through these my own perspective on what these intangible concepts really mean, and it's very self-revelatory as well as satisfying.
Now, I haven't totally figured out what this means, but I love the movie about the Beatles across the universe. Have you seen that?
I have to say I haven't seen that, no.
Oh, they put the Beatles songs into characters, so there was characters named after the Beatles songs, and they kind of embody the spirit of the songs.
Yes, now that you say that, yes, I have seen that movie. That's a beautiful film. Yeah.
Someday can a film be made that kind of puts those emotions into specific characters and create a story about that? Do you see that ever happening with your own work?
Well, I think we would have to find the right producer to fund the project. But it would be it's a really interesting idea. I hadn't thought of that. I would imagine you could. I think for me the initial challenge would be, like, when I write songs, I'm specifically looking at creating a whole story that you can tell in 3 minutes. And so it would be interesting to take something that, is very compressed, right? And how would you open it up and make it work for, the time length that you would need to tell a story in film, right? But what an intriguing challenge that would be. You may have started me on another project, David. Watch out.
That'd be cool. That'd be cool. Now, we're coming to the end of our time. Can you tell the audience what you're up to right now?
Yeah, I just finished the recording and mixing and mastering for my next CD, which is going to be called Parade, and I imagine that the release date will be sometime April or May of this year. It's totally, well, not totally different. It's definitely an evolution from my last album, Ghosts, which was me playing solo guitar and singing and doing half Delta Blues classics and half my own material. And as we were talking about, I've been doing a lot of writing since I did that album. And so my new album is going to feature 10 of my songs, one Tom Waits song. And then I've also got now a trio that I work with. So I have acoustic bass and clarinet on all the songs. And then I also have an accordion player playing on 7 or 8 of the songs. And I'm really, really, really excited about this project because it's allowed me to take my songs and make them bigger and broader. And yesterday I was actually at the mastering engineer's studio, and we were going through and doing the mastering for the CD. And he's the guy that worked with me on my last album. And, he said, wow, he's like, this sounds like you, but it's just bigger and broader. And I said, okay, good. That's kind of what it sounded like to me too. And so I'm really, really thrilled about the opportunity to put this out and see how people, connect with it. Because I think there's some really beautiful music in there.
Wow, that sounds like quite the journey you're on. But I appreciate you stopping by today, and hopefully you come back on because you just said so much. I really got to give it some thought. So thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks, David. I really appreciate it. Anytime somebody wants to talk about music, I'm going to show up.
Good deal. Good luck with the album. Have a good day.
Thank you, David. You take care.
And that was Bill Phillippe talking about how he creates his musical stories and the different dimensions of it. And there's lots of wisdom in what he shared that applies to all sorts of areas other than music. So I'd like to close out the program with a song from Bill Phillippe. It's called A Kind of Voice. It's about if you're in an argument or disagreement with somebody, how you kind of lost your kind voice and how you go back and find that kind voice again. So this is Bill Phillippe with A Kind of Voice.
Some ancient sin.